Welcome everybody to our another ACO presentation. We are honored to have two wonderful people with us today. Maremi and Andreozzi, who you may remember for a few months back, showed us a wonderful feminist related paintings. And she was introduced herself by Ada Rose, who has a gallery in Kensington, and brought us Julia Bloom as well. So we have a wonderful network of artists that is very hard at work for us, and it's wonderful. And this time, Maremi has a new artist for us, and I will let her introduce her. Stay tuned.
Yes, yes. Hi, thank you. Welcome. Thank you for that nice introduction. Yes, so Kyujin Lee is here to share her work with us. I've had the honor of showing with Kyujin on a number of different shows in the DC area, a number of different years. And I've actually heard you talk too a handful of times. So needless to say, I'm a huge fan. So I was trying to think about all the things that attract me to your work, Kyujin. I mean, first of all, it's figurative, and you have this narrative component. It's mythological. It's allegorical. It draws from folk tales and literary characters. So all this rich history that adds layer upon layer of meaning to your work. And then I have to admit that I was a little infatuated with fairy tales when I was growing up. So I would, when I was little, I would draw princesses and do sort of choose your own adventure, fairy tale inspired stories with my brother. And so I just love this well of resources. But the versions that I drew from fairy tales are not the versions that you draw from. So I love hearing you talk about that. Your versions are adult versions. They're going through these trials and tribulations that we'll hear more about. And another component of your work that I find so fascinating is that even though I've heard you talk on a number of occasions, I always come away with more questions than answers. And so this ambiguity to your work, this open-ended, this sort of free association that sometimes leaves a person fluxed or frustrated, I think is actually one of its greatest strengths. And I think it really gets to your desire to capture the human experience. And so I'm anxious to hear more and to hear more about your wonderful work. So without further ado, Kyujin, thank you.
Thank you so much, Maremi. Your responses to my work, listening to it is just it's thrilling, and thank you. And of course, I extend my thanks to Maremi and Mariana and Jordan for hosting this and giving me this opportunity. I am truly honored, and thanks to everyone who's here on a Saturday morning. And a special shout out to my two of my longtime cheerleaders and supporters, John and Amy. Thank you so much for being here. I feel so loved. I feel your love. So thank you. Okay, so I'll share my screen and I will start my presentation. Here we go. So I will start my presentation with a little introduction, beginning with some tips on how to pronounce my first name. My name is Kyujin. I am originally from South Korea, and Q is pronounced Q as in the English alphabet Q, and Jin as in gin and tonic. And this pronunciation guide has been a tried and true strategy that I was told, that has been working effectively for many non-Korean speakers. So since it works, I am planning on sticking with it. And I hope that was helpful to you all. So in today's presentation, I will cover the following 4 topics in this order. First, I will share with you what my recurring motifs are, and tell you some of my influences. And I will offer you some in-depth reading into some of my selected work. And last, I will take you behind the scenes of my creative process. Please stop me at any point if you have any questions. Of course, at the end, I hope to have some time for open Q&A sessions. And I welcome your responses and feedback and questions. But if you have any burning questions or comment, or mildly burning and questions and comment, please stop me. Don't hesitate. Okay, so let's start with my recurring motifs. So there are my recurring motifs have expanded over time gradually, but I'll start with the first three, and there are the Little Mermaid, and you can see her here, and Pinocchio and human. In all of my work, human form is a female figure. They are the protagonists of my visual stories. In other words, they are my actors, and I put them in different situations. And you know, I try to show, provoke a certain emotions or sentiment or mood by showing how they are behaving in various settings. And why the Little Mermaid and Pinocchio, one might ask. There are two reasons for it. First, because they made a big impression on me as a child. I think I was probably 8 or 9 or 10 years old when I read these storybooks, The Adventures of Pinocchio and the Little Mermaid. And I remember, especially, you know, reading The Adventures of Pinocchio, I remember feeling completely terrified and extremely frustrated by all the poor choices that he made for himself and eventually getting himself in trouble. And, you know, as a little child, you know, I was sort of like screaming into this book character, you know, come on, you know, wake up, get yourself together, you know, don't make that choices. And as for the Little Mermaid, I also remember feeling completely enamored and captivated by her love story and her passion and devotion and all of that. And I was extremely heartbroken, however, at the end of her story, because in the version that I read, she had a very tragic ending. And I remember I have a vivid recollection of having the book in front of me and reading the book over and over again over a course of a time, and hoping that the ending will be different. You know, especially, you know, I would get to the second to the last page, and before I turn the final page, I always would take a pause and pray wholeheartedly, right? Hoping that she would have a happy ending this time. But unfortunately, that never happened. But as you can see, you know, I have these two very strong memories of these stories when I engaged myself in them as a child. So that's one reason I incorporate them in my work. And the second reason is because I identify with them. Their imperfections, all their shortcomings. I mean, Pinocchio was a very lively, you know, active little boy. I mean, wooden puppet, but he was mischievous and he's self-indulgent and self-destructive and on many occasions. And I see myself in that. And the Little Mermaid was a very loving and very devoted, right? And she is a very lovable character, I think. And she's also very self-giving and sacrificial. And I also see myself in that, right? We are never one-dimensional. So I see, you know, different sort of aspects of who I am in these two characters. And I also recognize their relentless pursuit of becoming more than who they are. Because for them, they feel like they are lacking something, right? They are not a complete a being or existence, at least in their mind. And I identify with that as well. And for them, this human figure would be something that they aspire to become, right? This will be their sort of object of desire. But for me, also this figure, right, externally, yes, it may be fully complete and fully formulated. However, I question how she may be actually feeling inside. Does she feel complete or fulfilled and content inside? I question that. So all these three characters together, I see myself in that. As I mentioned, right, I see myself as a multidimensional existence, and that I find these different components of myself in them. And therefore, although there are three separate entities, I also see them as one. It's almost like a 3-in-1, sort of the whole package. And so I borrow these well-known characters and one sort of invented character in my head, put them together in all of my work, hoping to express and convey, my stories, my internal struggles, and my desire of striving to reach the my ideal selves, or my ideal idea of who I want to be. So in doing that, ultimately what I am hoping to do is that I am utilizing art making as a way of examining my own inner workings of my mind and my inner selves. And in it, as I said, I see multiple parts to it. And by examining and myself and reflecting on myself and how I am having all this, wide range of emotions on a daily basis and where they are coming from, I try to make sense of them so that I can sort of put them in a way that I can better understand myself and become a better version of myself, and ultimately hoping to reach some level of resolution, or gain some healing, or find a sense of peace. I am somebody who feels emotions intensely, and I am always very attuned to my internal psychological conflicts, which I know partially is rooted in my innate personal dispositions, but also it's strongly connected to my childhood experiences, including some traumatic ones. Exploring, what's underneath of my conscious level, I am trying to resolve some of this emotional struggles that I go through, and try to make sense of them, and hope that somebody out there who may be feeling the same conflicts, or feeling some emotional struggles, I hope that they would also come away with some sort of a sense of comfort, knowing that they are not the only one who's feeling that way, and that they may find themselves in some of my creations. So this particular painting is maybe a metaphysical or self-referential one, where it's really showing, the very creative process of mine in my own work, right? So these characters who are my alter egos or my stand-in figures, they are surrounded by these stuffed animals, which symbolize or represent childhood, and these childhood spirits or experiences or sentiments are being fed into these characters. At least that's how I see them or imagine them. Or they are sort of communicating, right, while they are in their dream state or subconscious state. And even in this scene, the Little Mermaid appears to be, sacrificial, as opposed to these two characters are more in a comfortable position. And in this painting also, you see the mermaid, Pinocchio, the human, and the mermaid. And there are multiple, in this case, versions of Pinocchios and mermaids. Because I create an imagined, unrealistic, surrealistic world, that I think that these characters can be omnipresent, occupying, one cohesive, singular pictorial space. But in my mind, they can exist multiple times in different pockets of the stories within a story. And in this picture, right, mermaid and the Pinocchio in this human form, which may not be a simple, empty shell without the, fulfilled substance in her. They themselves are the embodiment of my inner selves, but they are also engaged in looking inward, right? Looking at themselves. So this piece is basically about self-reflection, or the act of self-reflection. And sometimes, these figures are, whispering into me, other parts of me. Perhaps sending me conflicting messages. And it is up to the grown-up self of mine to decide which voice that I will listen to. Right? That changes, that decisions are varied depending on a day. And in this picture, I'm not sure which voice that this figure will eventually listen to. And sometimes I feel that, this incomplete or imperfect selves are weighing me down, and there are, I'm feeling the weight of them, and I have to sort of carry on, piggybacking them on the back of or on my shoulders, and trying to walk on the narrow and unstable path of life. And I'm doing, my best, try to balancing myself on it. And sometimes all these characters are in sync, right? They are, Pinocchio and mermaid appear to be, embrace, loving position, and they appear to be dancing, or, appear to generate some kind of movement. Probably in steps with, or listening to, or responding to the rhythms or the music that another part of me, a component of me is producing. And sometimes Pinocchio and the Little Mermaid, they themselves are creating their own music and sound. I don't know what kind of sounds that would be. I would imagine it would be probably, not very cheerful, perhaps, somewhat bluesy a sound. But, another part of me, right, the grown-up part of me is there to pay attention to and listen to, and augmenting it, right, augmenting their sound. And making those sounds audible to others, or make them visible to others. And in this case, the human figure character is supported by a mysterious, oversized hand image, and that's the fourth motif that I often use in my work, not always, but very often. And to me, this oversized hand represents hidden forces in life, some sort of a power from a higher being. Could it be a fate, or could it be an act of God? Whatever, whichever one makes it out to be. That's what I imagine. And these mysterious unknown forces, in real life, they are invisible, but in my work, they are quite visible. They can be actively engaged in whatever action that is happening in the pictorial spaces, in the stories. In other times, they may be simply just there, giving a little gentle support or giving comfort, or sometimes they could have some sort of oppressive nature to them. In this painting, once again, the grown-up self is carrying the less developed or underdeveloped selves, components of herself, encapsulated in a biblical symbol of innocence or purity. And she's trying to carry them as carefully as possible, as gently as possible. And she's caring for them. And yes, of course, there are times, certainly I really feel like, these three characters are completely bound together, and I just cannot separate them because they are one, but they are entangled in a way that is impossible to read them out and understand them. So this painting sort of expresses that despair, or the condition, or my strong desire, wanting to somewhat separate them and organize them in a way that, or compartmentalize them in a way that I could really better understand them, better look at them too. And in this picture, so these 3-in-1, right? This whole package deal, they are navigating through life, and navigating the ocean of the subconscious world. And this subconscious world is hidden or draped by a mysterious cover. And that cover is being revealed or exposed by, once again, a set of mysterious hand. Or that could be me, right? This could be, in terms of, right, like, the mysterious forces, right? That could be eventually channeled through me as a creator, right, artist, and somebody, right, who examines my own world and my own minds and inner selves. And, it could be me who's lifting that cover and discovering what's in it. And as I mentioned, my current emotions and the decisions that I make based on the feelings that I'm feeling at the moment, I often feel that they are the product of my past experiences, is including my childhood experiences. So in this picture, it's a visual representation of the very act of metaphorically, right? I am drawing out sort of this memory box, right, in a way, and I am digging into it, right? I'm digging through it and see what's in it. And in it, I see Pinocchio and the Little Mermaid and the human form, and other perhaps stuffed animals and so on. And the fifth recurring motif that I began to use starting this particular piece in 2020, that is the Little Red Riding Hood character images. And to me, she is, she represents naive or trusting, kind of childlike presence. And unlike Pinocchio or the Little Mermaid, right? She doesn't have, any dark past, right? Or the baggages of or hangups from her past. So to me, she's like a blank slate. And I like the idea of having her in my art stories, because I feel that she could be more fluid character in my stories, because she doesn't have that sort of heavy past or hangups from the past. So sometimes she is a participant within the stories, and other times she's simply an observer in my stories. And I feel like she can offer that flexibility because of her own original characters from the original stories. So these are the 5 recurring motifs that I am currently working with, and I don't know, perhaps in the future, my recurring motif repertoire might continue to grow, and if it certainly happens, I mean, all these images, I mean, I discovered them, or they emerged out of my instinct. It wasn't planned, so a similar path would take me to a place where I would discover another characters or invent my own. I will certainly embrace that. So now I will move on to sharing some of my influences, and this is one. So, Tom and Jerry cartoon. I mean, I grew up in South Korea in the 70s and 80s and 90s, and as a child in the 70s, 80s, and also in my 20s, I watched this Tom and Jerry cartoon show. I mean, we had that in South Korea. We had many American cartoons, and along with Japanese cartoons on TV, but Tom and Jerry was definitely by far one of my favorite. I loved the humor. I mean, of course, some of this humor is a little dark, it can be a little violent, but I still love them. I adore them. And I think I was very drawn to this endless cycle of cat and mouse chase, right? Because I think I see my inner conflict in a very similar way, right? It's like never ending. And, I feel like, one day I feel like, I'm feeling fine and I feel completely content, and other times, completely falling into some sort of, despair and frustrations and disappointments and so on. And I feel like I'm constantly going through that cycle, and whatever that ideal image of what my life could be, what I want my life to be, it always feels like, very evasive, like the way Jerry is always so evasive, slipping away, right? The grips of Tom's. So anyway, so I find myself, right, definitely incorporating that sentiment in my work. First, I need to tell you the current art format that I am utilizing. They actually began in my graduate work. So I will share with you 2 of my paintings that I created during my graduate studies. And as you can see, back then, my work was a lot more linear, like the way one might find in cartoons, as opposed to being painterly. So that's right. So you can see the traces of the cartoon influences, and the idea of and when I think about the Tom and Jerry's chase, I envision them as sort of a circular movement. So I find myself sort of employing the similar visual compositions or movement. So I would often have a sort of a central image, and then I'll have subordinate or smaller elements sort of possessing the surrounding areas and link to from one element to the next, and then eventually connect to the main central image. So this is one of the work from my graduate studies, and here is another work. And once again, here in the center, you will see the Pinocchio-like figures and the Little Mermaid, right? Sort of they are merged together. And I have all this small images surrounding them and encircling them. So you will see that compositional influences from Tom and Jerry cartoon. And then my other influences are Hieronymus Bosch's work and Salvador Dali's work. I suspect that there are surrealistic and narrative-driven quality of their work wouldn't be so surprising for you all in terms of their influences on my work. And then two additional artists that I continue to feel inspired by are Andrew Wyeth and Via Selmin's work. I feel that these are one of the two artists who are masterful at animating the inanimated objects. They somehow have this amazing ability to breathe life into this inanimated objects. And that is certainly something that I try to emulate in my work. When I look at these objects, I find them emotionally, fully charged existence. And certainly in my work, I try to, I hope to provoke or stir, that kind of strong level of emotions through my characters and some of the objects or settings that I put my characters in. So now I will move on I'll share some of the in-depth stories of my work. But before I do, I know Mariana and Maremi had mentioned about Ada Rose earlier. But for those of you who does not know her, I want to introduce her to you all. And if you are local, I highly recommend for you to visit her gallery. She has a wide range of artwork at her gallery, and they are absolutely breathtaking and amazing to look at. And she's a wonderful person to talk to, about anything, but especially art. And one of the amazing gifts that she has, besides, the fact that she is an amazing human being and having a huge heart, and she has been an amazing mentor to me. Her extraordinary ability to read and articulate her responses to different kinds of art. And at one point, she shared one of my paintings on her social media, and she always accompanied the artist's work with little written descriptions of her own interpretations or her own reading into the work. And yes, if you have Instagram, I would also recommend you to follow her and her gallery, because every day she introduces different kinds of art and different kinds of artists' work. And in one of her postings, I remember reading that she wrote something like, she described my characters in these 4 action words. She said, my characters appear to dream and desire and fight and float. And when I read that, it was enlightening to me. I was like, oh my gosh, that is so true. I never thought of it that way, but that is very true. My characters are indeed, they always dream, desire, fight, and float. And in other words, that's how I feel, right? My inner selves are doing all of these every day. So to offer some of sort of in-depth stories behind my work, I thought I would borrow her Andreozzi's eloquently phrased these words as a sort of framework to share with you some of the stories that I thought of when I created them. Of course, I totally believe in multiple interpretations, and I would invite your own responses and readings of my work. And if you are willing, I would love to hear them. But I'll share with you what I initially thought of when I created them. So in this piece, I feel like all of these actions are happening, right? So we have Pinocchio, and there is an army of passionate and industrious little mermaids who are trying to fix him, whether he likes it or not. There is one little mermaid who's trying to sewing off some of his nose, represents his lies, and try to keep his lies shorter or disappear. And then another mermaid is holding some sort of vacuuming hose and trying to clear out all the messy thoughts that he may have in his brain. And there is that mysterious hand that appears to assisting her. At least in my mind, that's what I see. And then another mermaid is seems like it's going into a different dimension that is separate from whatever this environment. And in doing that, she's pulling this pulley and taking this pulley is connected to his heart, and it's pulling once again that entangled a heart or pain that he may have inside him, and trying to get rid of it, pull it out. And then there are others who are trying to clean him up and fixing him up with all these tools. And so they certainly show their desire and their dream of fixing him once again, whether he wants it or not. And they are all floating in this airy, dreamlike environment. And they are all fighting for this little guy. And in this picture, of course, you may find some other elements in them, but one of the most pronounced actions that I feel that I can find, that I see in this painting, is the dream aspect of it, or dreaming aspect of it, where the Pinocchio is holding the plush, the toy airplane, and he's playing with it, and imagining perhaps himself flying in it. And this human figure is sitting in an airplane-like device with propeller in front of it. But this aviation device is far too small for her body, so it's probably won't be able to take her off the ground, but she still remains there, and she's hoping to take off one day. And the Little Mermaid is here as a sort of cheerleaders for these two characters, and she's basically saying, hey, I'll be the air traffic controller for you guys, and I'll guide you, I'll signal you when you can fly off and take off. And there are days, when I feel like I just want to put all this imperfect selves of mine, putting it into a bottle and just bottling it up, and just put the lid on tightly so that I don't ever have to face them again. So there are days when I feel this strong desire. And then, of course, there are days when I feel like I just want to break away from the darkness, the shortcomings, and reach some sort of escape ladders to escape from all of these. And then there are days, I simply observe, my other elements of me, this struggling elements. They are, doing their things, going through the life journey, and I'm just seeing them, just going through it all. And the little Red Riding Hood is just simply looking on and just observing them. And there is this mysterious submarine head. I don't know if some other existence is in it, and what is the purpose of it. I don't know, but mysteriously, it's also occupying the same space, and it's there. So these are some of the in-depth stories that I wanted to share with you about my work. And now finally, I will share with you the creative process, how all these images actually come together. So I start with, I don't start with a blank images or a blank plates, a blank canvas or paper. I use surrealistic automatic response of using pigments and my target, the painting surface. And I always start with something like this, where I just wash over and splatter and and making just random marks first. And then once the instantaneous marks and spontaneous marks were made and dried, then I look at the mark makings, right? What has been left. And then I try to define and discover and define what I see in them. And usually I would start with like one or two central images that I recognize right away. And then from there, I try to figure out what the rest of the images could be and what kind of story that I can plot out. And then once I have sort of basic ideas and compositions in my sketch, then I start draw. And this is the example of how this random marks transformed into a more defined composition. So here, I have a phthalo blue marks, and I saw some sort of a oval shape with some long sort of vertical narrow forms, rectangular forms. And so that eventually turned into a wall-mounted mirror-like object image. And here I have a cobalt blue circle, small circle stain, and then the triangular shape. And that turned into a part of the little Red Riding Hood's cape. And this ultramarine wash, a little bit more broader drip or wash section of the composition with a little pointy tip at the top, turned into this hand image. And two drips, vertical drips here turned into a part of the two legs of a sitting human figure, and smaller drips are that turned into binoculars. And then I saw some skull-like image, so I reinforced that image. And then this more elongated blob, then I turned that into sort of the series of small bones attached on the spine, which I imagine that are connected to this skull. And then this is one of the most recent pieces that I created. And unfortunately, I didn't think about taking a picture of it before I start sketching it all. But however, after I sketched up to this point, I thought of it and taking a picture of it. And I added 2 additional images. And I thought I would show you that transition. So this ultramarine streak, a vertical streak, turned into a part of a stick that I imagined it to be a metal detector. And then this broad diagonal sort of swatch or stroke of cerulean blue. I turned that into once again part of the little Red Riding Hood's cape. And then these little kind of radiating kind of little drops of gray marks. They became a part of another small human figure's head. And this human figure is holding some sort of a catching sort of a net. And this sketch eventually turned into this painting. And I just finished this painting actually a few days ago. And in this painting was the very first painting where I felt compelled to add some additional pieces to it. I actually really like doing some heavily cropped images where, part of images are sort of cut off, because to me that kind of resembles sort of that sort of carries the cinematic quality to my work. But in this particular case, I really felt strongly that I really needed to add the rest of Pinocchio's bodies, the hand and the rest of his boots. And I did that, and I don't know if it's something that I would continue in the future. I will tell you, if I feel compelled in other pieces, I will definitely embrace it, because I like to work with whatever my instinct takes me. And in this particular case, though, I thought it was fitting because this piece is about, it's called Picking Up the Pieces. It's about this, right? Once again, the grown-up human self is picking up these, less perfect or underdeveloped selves. And, picking oneself up is already a challenging task. But then I thought, how much more challenging and difficult it would be if I need to take part of myself that is out of bounds. And I just wanted to add more drama to it. And then this is the last piece that I'll show you in terms of showing the traces of my initial marks. I think by now, I hope that you can easily kind of recognize how the transformation or evolution had occurred from the original instant random marks to more deliberately delineated and defined shapes and images. So like a Buddha shape, and then this little part turned into a Pinocchio's hand, and this little part turned into his foot, and so on. So I hope that I didn't take up too much time. So thank you very much. And this is all. And I have to tell you, I am a school teacher, and I teach middle school art at a small independent school. And as a teacher, I always find myself over preparing. And of course, for this presentation, I over prepared, and I ended up having to take away some of the visual slides that I wanted to show you. But before I stop sharing my slides, I thought I would just quickly just show you, just, without just telling you what they are, just so that in case if you haven't seen them, you can see them. And you'll see all of these images in my website. So that's it. Thank you so very much. I hope that I didn't bore you too much. And I really appreciate you for being so patient.
Wow, this was wonderful, Kyujin. Did I do it right?
Yes.
So wonderful.
Thank you.
May I start with a question? And I think there are going to be many questions. I see so many themes in your work, and you're so articulate and insightful. And I'm wondering how much of the immigrant experience might have informed some of that. And I'm curious about your art journey. How did you decide to go into art? If you could tell us a little, and I have many more questions, but that's how I'm going to start. Thank you.
Sure. I mean, actually, your first question about, right, my immigrant experiences and how that sort of feeds into my work, I think that's actually a very insightful question. I didn't think about it until, you questioned me. But as soon as you mentioned it, I mean, of course, I see the connections. I mean, as a, extremely introverted person, and I was an extremely shy child growing up, and, I kept, a lot in me, right? And I, oftentimes I find myself unable to really express myself. And but as an immigrant, right, with the language barrier at first that I experienced and all of that, and I continue to sometimes feel that, right? I, feel like I
But
can't.
your English is superb. And I'm an immigrant too, by the way, so I kind of can relate.
Right, right. Right, so I think that definitely enhances, or that the feeling of, oh, I can't really express, I can't really tell how I'm feeling. But luckily, I have my art, and therefore I'm relying on my art to, let it all out. So I think I'll say that. And then your second question was, I'm sorry.
About your art journey, how did you decide to become an artist?
Yes, actually, so this is a bit of a perhaps a TMI, but I'll keep it short. Um, uh, uh, my father is a mathematician, and he opposed to me becoming an artist, and I, he wasn't very supportive at first, but so I, went through sort of liberal arts program in Korea, and go through I majored in educational psychology and English minor and all of that. But then, during my college years, I still had this sort of burning desire of wanting to engage myself in art making. So I started taking small classes. And I think my father saw how devoted I was. And in my senior year in college, I was like, I must continue on this path. And I really wanted to continue. And I proposed to my father that I wanted to go abroad and study. And I wanted to go to New York because, New York is hub of art. And he was okay with that because my aunt was still lives in New Jersey, and she's nearby. And I think he felt safe to send me away. So that's how I started. And I think I think at first when I started, I think I didn't realize how important and instrumental art making is to me or to my life, because to me it is a way of it's very therapeutic to me. It's a way of keeping myself sane, especially like I said, as a person who's tends to keep things inside. It's very helpful. So.
Thank you so much. John Tyler has a question, and there is a comment in the chat. I'll read later.
Hi, Kyujin. You know how much I love your art. It's just fantastic. I could, watching your presentation was such a treat to see the new things you're working on and to have your explanation. But my question, and it's, it's kind of a mundane one, really, but your work is so overpoweringly storytelling, and the fantastic dreamscapes that you create with these characters. How do you, but you also have this incredible technique, graphic artist, painterly, approach to it. How do you bring together the sort of technical aspects of what you do, the painting and the graphics and the, with the, fantastic storytelling?
Thank you. So when I was in Korea, I had intense training in, realistic, drawings and paintings and all of that. So I have that training under my belt. And because I actually, in a way, I did not go through the traditional path of art education. As an art student, I did not go to art school when I was in Korea. I only went to graduate, from exploring my art on my own way, and then from there I straight went to the graduate school in New York. So I think that in a way kind of freed me up, and therefore I was able to find my own voice quickly. Because I didn't have any other things that I could rely on. And I think that's how I ended up sort of combining, those two elements, more traditional, right, skill-based techniques, along with, the conceptual aspect of it. It's more, my own invention. I mean, I have to tell you, for a long time, I felt like, what I was doing, is so trite, but then I saw other contemporary artists. I mean, I'll mention another, contemporary artist that I absolutely admire. His name is James Barsness, and I remember seeing his work while I was studying in New York in one of the prestigious art gallery in New York, and his work was very cartoony. And when I saw that, and he was also, at the time, he was a high school art teacher. So in my mind, I was like, wow, if he can do it, I can do it too, right? So he sort of showed me a way. I mean, not directly, but indirectly. So I am grateful to that too.
Thank you so much.
Of course.
That's wonderful. Other questions?
Well, I can see Anthony's a question here, and he asked, do you organize bodies of work or solo shows by narratives or other themes? That's a great question too, because, right, I don't know what I'm going to create until I actually start creating, because I don't have I have a general theme, right? I always, although I don't necessarily intend to, I always tend to go to, to my own sort of, feelings and emotions and the stories that I am feeling. And oftentimes, they are not necessarily very cheerful themes. But by large, I really don't know what I am creating or what I will be creating until, right, I start with the random marks and whatever that inspires me. So I can't really plan anything or a body of work under a certain, very specific theme. But so when I put together my artwork for a show, I just usually just put together, whatever the most current work that I could, manage to create, because I'm a school teacher, and I know there are plenty of art teachers or other professionals who manage to, balance both careers, art careers and their, other jobs. But I somehow, the multitasking is not my strength, and I just can't find myself really being very prolific. So I oftentimes have to just really, scrape all the new pieces together to, put together a show. So, but thank you for your question, Anthony. Yes.
I thought the description of your process was fascinating. Thank you. And particularly, establishing just the loose wash and then finding images. I wondered whether your recurring images become too dominant or, taking over. And if you wish, you could find some other images in this wonderful beginning.
Yes. I do worry sometimes, right? I may fall into sort of like this habitual mannerism, right? And becomes kind of stale, or, almost like, duplicating myself, right? Because I start seeing that, right? I would have an umbrella image in one of the paintings, and later on I would have sort of similar settings. And I feel like, oh, is it kosher, right? But I think as of now, at least, I feel that I'm not too tired of it. And therefore, and I feel like, I think I am sort of waiting for the natural organic process. I think whatever that, emotional resolution or some sort of, next stage, of my mental, psychological journey, if I get to, and I'm hoping that will lead me to a new discoveries and new images. And when that happens, certainly I'll embrace it. I will not turn my eyes away from it just because, right? Because I don't feel that like, oh, I must have Pinocchio, I must have the mermaid. I mean, I don't feel that way. Although I have to say, I don't feel that I need to step away from it yet.
Thank you. That was very interesting.
Thank you so much for your question. Yes, Mark.
Beautiful discussion. And thank you so much. I learned so much this time around, especially about your process, which I hadn't really seen before. So that was such a treat. And your inspirations, Hieronymus Bosch. And You may have already touched on this, but I just wanted to ask again, or in a different way. I mean, what is your feeling after you finish a picture? Do you feel relief? I mean, oftentimes when I finish something, I feel like, okay, there's a door that that's open and I want to go down this other door, this other path. I mean, do you feel that too? Or can you describe a little bit of that feeling after you finish a painting? And wonderful discussion.
Thank you, Maremi. Yes, of course. I mean, I have to say, for me, I mean, because it's sort of, right, it's very personal and very emotional process. And therefore, when I finish, it feels like, ah, it's out. And I feel the sudden, right, sense of relief. And I feel like, oh, this is the best painting that I've ever done. I always feel that way. But then, of course, a week later, 2 weeks later, when I have new pieces, like, what was I thinking, right? Um, but then yes, and then oftentimes there are new elements, right? Like in this case, in the recent paintings that I showed you, like when I felt compelled to add additional pieces outside, right, of my pictorial space, that was interesting. That was exciting to me. I was like, oh, this is exciting. I wonder if I would run into that moment of wanting to add that in the future. And Maremi, I have a great admiration for your work, and you as an artist, you are one of the most studious, and your research is just so amazing. And I imagine, right, for you, you would always have the moment of having this new insights. But unlike you, I'm not as brilliant as you are, so I don't think that moment of enlightenment or new ideas. I can't say I always have that, but there are definitely moments when I notice new things or new possibilities, and then I really get excited, of course.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you.
If I may, I have
Yes.
a couple of other comments that I see a feminist undercurrent in your work. And I see also a very interesting to me theme of mothering. And that, you fix, or not you, but the women fix Pinocchio, the mermaids, and they tend to be women. And Little Red Riding Hood is a woman, but she is kind of young and naive, and she's also kind of fixed. And I wonder if you're a mom, or if you also consider your students like you're mothering, like I've taught also, and it just feels like a mothering activity.
Yes, I mean, definitely teaching is definitely, I mean, I think that's why I find teaching really challenging, because it's a different form of parenting, right? And I myself, I don't have a child. And I think it's because I am just too occupied, right, caring for myself. So I am the mother to myself as well, right? So I feel like, that's why I can never have, other, little ones in real life. But yes, true. I definitely feel, the role, having to take a role of parenting when I interact with students, which I'm not always successful at, but I do my best.
Join the club. But I think that's fascinating also. And in that sense, you could continue the theme forever, because it's so many themes that undergird your work. Any other questions?
I got a quick question. This is more of a just an observation, but your color palette for the vast majority of the beginning of this was very kind of aqua, ultramarine, cerulean kind of colors. Aside from the last one, which had kind of these bolts of yellow, and it was kind of, I imagine, the idea of joy. And prior to that last painting that you kind of hinted at, there was a single portrait that I could remember. Every face was kind of this mop of like, I identified as like this Oni type haircut, like shooting out of that, and the last one also had kind of this Buddha head involved. So there's kind of two different things that I saw the last body or last piece in particular that I didn't see prior to it. Is there any, I don't know what to put words into this, but is this a new kind of thing or a new direction of having different colors and having color symbolism, or how does that play out in your head?
Right. Actually, it's the other way around. I actually used to have a lot of colors. But then at some point, I was getting a feedback from a gallerist, actually, the gallerist that I liked, where one of my idols, Mr. Barsness, is showing his work. His gallerist looked at my work and he questioned my color choices, and not that I agree with him, but I kind of heard what he was saying, and that I thought, okay, I want to then kind of limit myself in terms of color choices and see what each color families can kind of offer me. And I started with blue because blue is my favorite color, and I haven't felt that I'm done with it. So I'm just continuing with the blue color palette. But, I mean, of course, with the introduction of the Little Riding Red Hood, I start using a little red and pink, and some greens as well. But yes, so it's actually the other way around. Yeah, thank you. And I know that Amy had her hand up for a while, and then Trisha. So why don't I go with Amy and then Trisha? Would that be okay? Yes.
Hey there, I'm sorry, I was having trouble getting to the mute and unmute. Maremi spoke so beautifully to one of the qualities of your artwork that I appreciate the most, and to your speaking about it, which is it always leaves me with more questions. And I just think that is such an extraordinary gift. So I have a new one, which is I was noticing today as we were looking at the artwork that there's a very different texture to your animal, like stuffed animal or those kinds of figures. And I wondered if you could speak a little bit to how you came to that versus the I don't know how to explain it in words, but the different texture of your sort of more dreamscape figures.
Yeah, I think there are probably two factors. One is, I jump around on different painting surfaces. Sometimes I use canvas, sometimes I use paper, and sometimes I use mulberry paper. It's a type of rice paper, and they all absorb the pigments in different way. And when I apply paints, also they present different personalities. So that's one. And then another one is, I think I start sort of try to vary the saturation or value levels in my work to give it a little, right? Certain characters more stand out than others. And when I try to mute some of the subordinate or secondary sort of characters, I tend to mute them in terms of their saturation levels. And when I do, I tend to really water down my paint. And that may end up giving a really smooth looking. Of course, it depends on the surface, though. Sometimes, it may end up actually giving a really rough texture because I may not putting a lot of painting layers on top of, rough canvas surface. But that's probably another reason. Thank you. And then Trisha, thank you so much for your patience.
Oh, this has been fascinating. I was especially captured by your use of the free marks on the canvas to focus your very fertile imaginary subconscious thinking. And I just wanted to suggest, when looking at one of the later paintings, you mentioned that has, I think, Red Riding Hood, fairly large and very colorful, dominantly red. And at the same time, Pinocchio and is it the Little Mermaid are very small, and they're trying to escape off the corner of your page. And I'm wondering if your subconscious is suggesting to you that maybe it's time to let them become less prominent and maybe escape altogether from your artwork.
Yeah, definitely, right? Like, it does definitely happen, right? There are times when they are really appear to be really small, and other times they appear to be really big. And unfortunately, I find myself, every new piece that I am painting, they all vary. Like, I may end up creating a series of, a couple of paintings where all these characters appear to be really small, and I might sort of thinking that, oh, maybe it is time that I am so ready to move on. But then all of a sudden in the next painting, all of a sudden I see them really huge. And so I feel like it's not so much in control. At least, I mean, I know I can control it if I want to, but I think at least for now, I don't want to be in control of that. I feel like I want to remain faithful to the surrealistic process that I committed myself to. And I want to just invite my subconscious to guide me. But thank you. But to be honest, I mean, in my therapy sessions, I do talk about to my therapist, is actually my art making is actually making me not better because I am constantly preoccupied by, this existence of my imperfect selves and feelings and all of that. But at least for me, I don't think so. I think it's actually helping. I mean, I think it takes a long time. I mean, I mean, at least for me, I can only speak for myself. I think it takes a long time for me to process it all. And I wouldn't be surprised if it becomes a lifelong journey because I have always been a very slow learner. So I think I'm being very slow.
Well, you do very, very interesting, very creative work. I applaud it.
Thank you so very much for all your encouragement. I feel really honored. Thank you.
Yes, hi, thank you. I have dropped a few statements to her clarity within herself to just dive in without any veil in front of herself. I'm here. Here we are developing together and finding and being. We all have purpose in life. And she's found something of hers.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
She's authentic.
Yes, ma'am.
Oh,
It shows.
That's the biggest compliment. I'll take it. Thank you so much.
So we've gone a little over and it's been so fascinating. So I hope you indulged us. Thank you, everybody. We have next week, next session, we will not have it. We'll have a little break on July 27. And then the following 2 weeks after that, we have Teresa Oaxaca from the Art Students League in Virginia. Presenting for us, hopefully, and I hope you all join us. Please write to us if you have comments, questions, and as always, we are so grateful for donations and to the Glen Echo Park and to the Maryland Arts Council. So we'll close right now unless there are any burgeoning. There is a comment from Lisa Horowitz. Hi, Lisa. Wonderful art and terrific, honest, and open presentation. Thank you. And I think we all agree to that.
Thank you so very much.
Super artist. I hope we can see your work sometime soon. Are you going to be at the Ada Rose or?
Yes. Yes, some of my work is at Ada Rose Gallery. Yeah.
Wonderful. And the rest might be on your website as well?
Yes, all of them are.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And everybody have a wonderful rest of the weekend and beyond. Thank you. Stay cool.
Thank you
guys.
so much.
Thank you, Maremi.
Thank you, Maremi. Thank you.
Thank you, Maremi and Kyujin.
Thank you very much.
Bye,
Thank
Kyujin.
you.
Thank you.
Bye, John.